What an interesting week, technically, too, that it was. We had a lot of upsets last night. We had a lot of first time wins for some of our first year head coaches in the area. It was just a big night all around here in Spartanburg County High School football. We had obviously the biggest upset of the night last night. We'll get to that a little bit more here in just a second, but Spartanburg finally beats Dutch Fork after several attempts at it. Dorman picks up their first win last night under Jake Morris. Woodruff picked up their first win last night under Brett Sloan. And then Landrum picked up their first win last night under Brent Bridges. So, again, just a night full of firsts and a night full of the unexpected. And it's just one of those nights that, to be honest, is what makes high school football so great. It's just one of those nights that you live for, especially when you cover high school football. To see so many upsets happen. This is something that it was like watching a playoff race unfold. It was like a week 10 kind of week, but it happens in week 2, which begs the question of how insane is this season shaping up to be? Because we've already seen so many interesting things happen over these last couple of weeks that nobody expected. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this season folds out as it goes forward. Let's dive a little bit into the action from last night. The game I was in attendance at was Broome-Chesney, a matchup that last week, when you looked at it on paper, especially after what Chesney did to Blue Ridge, you kind of figured this was going to be an exciting, close matchup. Didn't end up being the case, and all the credit in the world for that goes to Broome. I'm not going to sit here and completely discredit Chesney or say that they're not any good, because of what they did last week to Blue Ridge was still impressive, all in the same, especially when they're trying to switch from being a run-heavy team to a team that tries to spread it out a little bit and pass the ball. Now, I will say this, Chesney's version of passing isn't to run it out of the shotgun and spread it out all over the field. What they do is, they'll still mix in the run a little bit, but they'll do a lot of little bubble screens, a lot of screen passes. They'll do a lot of swing passes. They'll do a lot of little short yardage passes, more or less. A lot of laterals, just not a lot of deep shots down the field, not a lot of slants, not a lot of anything like that. So Chesney's passing game is still, it's almost, you couldn't even say it's in the intermediate passing range, but again, they're working towards putting the pass into their repertoire a little bit more. So maybe this is just a step in development for them, where they're just kind of taking it slow and easy to start and mixing in the run. Who knows? But that was what I observed out of Chesney last night, was that their passes are all basically just little short yardage plays designed to go 2, 3, 4 yards to mix in with the run game. But last night, they couldn't get an opportunity to get it going because Broome just absolutely smothered them. And on top of that, coming into this season, you knew Kamaje Brackett Brandon, as he moves into his senior year, was going to be really good with an extra year of experience and development under his belt. You knew Jason Farmer coming on the staff there at Broome was only going to help their offense get better, especially with Broome being a team that does run the ball and him being the guy that coordinates the run game for them. You knew, obviously, Jalen McGill was super talented, and going into his sophomore year with a year of experience under his belt, he was going to be even more dangerous. But the development and the talent displayed between these two was just absolutely phenomenal last night. Let's look at the stats from last night for Broome. All right. Kamaje Brackett Brandon was 5 of 11 for 83 yards, 3 touchdowns. And he also ran the ball 10 times for 120 yards. Jalen McGill, 16 rushes for 193 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 touchdown reception of 14 yards. So the two of them combined accounted for most of Broome's offense. Broome had 436 yards of total offense last night, 353 rushing yards, only 83 passing yards. The rest of the stats of note, Darren Crook, he opened the scoring for Broome last night. He had a touchdown run of, I think, 7 yards to end their first drive of the game. He ran the ball 5 times for 39 yards. Grayson Bradley had 2 receptions for 38 yards and a touchdown. His touchdown was just a little check down that Kamaje Brackett Brandon hit him on. It was on like 3rd and inches, and he just somehow managed to dodge a tackle from the middle of the field, cut back towards the near sideline, and just took off and went basically untouched for a touchdown. I think that one was 15 yards. An impressive touchdown for Grayson Bradley. Trayshawn Suber had an impressive touchdown reception. He had 2 catches for 31 yards. He had a 20-something yard touchdown reception where Kamaje Brackett Brandon just lofted it to him. He had a guy kind of on his back, but Kamaje put it just to where only Trayshawn could reach it. He dove for it, made a nice little catch as he was in the air, came down with it for the touchdown. So just an impressive offensive showing last night for Broome. Apologize for that. Just an offensive showing. It was phenomenal for Broome last night, and it's only going to get better as the year goes along. If you're not familiar with the names Kamaje, Brackett Brandon, and Jalen McGill right now, you better get ready for it. Kamaje, Brackett Brandon, and Jalen McGill are going to be a holy terror for any defense they face for the rest of this season, and any hope that you have of beating those guys is going to hinge on you trying to stop Jalen McGill, who is probably one of the most really both of them. They're two of the most elusive players I've ever seen. Kamaje, Brackett Brandon, Chesney got to him a couple of times early in the game last night, and he just managed to juke his way out of it. He would take a hit and somehow still maintain his footing and keep going. He's got all the speed in the world, and the same for Jalen McGill. Jalen McGill made a lot of impressive moves last night as well. He escaped a lot of pressure. He managed to break a lot of tackles last night. All in all, any success that you're going to have against Broome is going to hinge on stopping those two guys, and that is a lot easier said than done. So just hats off to Kamaje, Brackett Brandon, and Jalen McGill. Hats off to Broome because they absolutely dominated Chesney last night. Chesney's most notable performance came out of Noah Lauder. He had 2 touchdowns in the game last night. Both of them were receiving. He had one touchdown. He had a long, I think, 30-something yard receiving touchdown to get them on the board. It wasn't early on in the game. It was late in the first half. And then he had another big play that set up the touchdown late in the game, where basically Chesney scored on the last play of the game for like a 49-yard touchdown reception right at the horn. So in reality, the scoreboard, it looks better than the game honestly was, because again, you had the late touchdown by Chesney. In reality, it could have been 49-14. Instead, it was 49-20. But just an absolute dominant effort by Broome, and just hats off to those guys for what they did last night, as Broome improves to 2-0 on the season with 2 very impressive wins over Powdersville and Chesney. Moving on to the rest of what happened in Week 0 last night, we'll look at Spartanburg just a little bit. Not going to go into detail on what happened in the game for the Vikings. Spartanburg, obviously, Dutch Fork has had their number for a very long time, and if you're Mark Hodge, that's one thing that you're actually okay with, because the thing that Mark Hodge wants to do is, he's a firm believer in that old adage from wrestling, in order to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And by and large, 6 out of the last 7 state championships, regardless of where you think Dutch Fork stands, because everybody's been saying they're a little bit down this year, regardless of where you think Dutch Fork stands, this win was still impressive. Yes, Dutch Fork is now 0-2 for the first time since 2015. But again, this is a team that's had Spartanburg's number. This is a team that's had pretty much everybody in the Upstate's number, except for Gaffney when they beat him in the 2020 state championship game. And even then, Gaffney had to fight like heck to come back in that game to pull it off. So Dutch Fork was still playing really well in that. 6 out of 7 5A state championships, and even when they were on the 4A level when Tom Knotts first showed up there, Dutch Fork was really good. Dutch Fork is, by and large, the premier program in the state of South Carolina right now, hands down. Regardless of where you think they stand, this was an impressive win for Spartanburg, and this was just really a big win for the entire Upstate, because, like I said, Dutch Fork has had everybody in the Upstate's number. Everybody in the Upstate's been clamoring for a chance to take them down, and so far only Gaffney and Spartanburg have been able to do it. So just hats off to the Vikings. Spartanburg's defense played phenomenally in this game. TJ Johnson had a much better week here between weeks 1 and 2. You look at it, he had, as far as passing goes, he was 10 of 16 for 77 yards with a touchdown. He also had 14 rushes for 31 yards. So not the biggest stat line for him, but according to Ryan Clary, he was a little bit more confident this week than he was last week, which is pretty big going up against Dutch Fork. But by and large, the story of the game was Spartanburg's defense, particularly Damian Coates. The game still in question a little bit late. Damian Coates comes up and he picks up a fumble from the 2-yard line and picks it up for the scoop and score, kind of puts it away, makes it 17-6 in favor of Spartanburg. And Justin Rice also had a big game for the Vikings. He had the